Contested elections laying an unnerving precedent as we look forward to the 2020 election. While most candidates like Bill Nelson and Martha McSally and Andrew Gillum ultimately accepted the will of the voters, the Georgia candidate Stacey Abrams claims that there was voter suppression in that race, although there appears to be no evidence of that. Here's part of her speech that raised eyebrows.
Of concession. Because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. As a woman of conscience and faith, I cannot concede that. But my assessment is the law currently allows no further viable remedy.
So when pressed on why yesterday by Jake Tapper, Abrams said this.
Is he the legitimate governor-elect of Georgia?
He is the person who won an adequate number of votes
but that's
to become the governor.
With all due respect, you're not using the word legitimate. Is he the legitimate governor-elect of Georgia?
He is the legal governor of Georgia.
So we're going to talk about that. And Florida, always a powder keg of electoral messiness. Today saw the resignation of the woman who became the face of that head-scratching voter insanity that we watched over the past couple of weeks. But is Florida destined to still be a big concern in 2020?
Rick Scott won, and he won by a lot. I don't know what happened to all those votes that disappeared at the very end. And if I didn't put a spotlight on that election before it got down to the 12,500 votes, he would have lost that election, okay? In my opinion, he would have lost. They were taking that election away from him. So my next guest played a crucial role there. Jessica First Johnson, being called the GOP's secret weapon in Florida. The 37-year-old Florida native is considered one of the foremost election law experts in the country. Lesser known than Democrat lawyer Mark Elias, whose name is known to many as the Clinton attorney, he flew to Bill Nelson's side to push for the recount. Johnson was crucial to Governor Scott's outcome and is watching Florida and Georgia's matching laws ahead of the presidential race. And she joins me now. Good to have you with us, Jessica, this evening. Thanks for being here. You say that as soon as you saw that Mark Elias was headed to Florida, you knew that you needed to head there as well. Why?
Well, you know, as an election law attorney, I certainly recognize his name. And when I saw that he was interested in this race, I knew it was going to be a really big deal. I also knew that, you know, Governor Scott was victorious on November 6th. He won by more than 12,000 votes. So I knew if Mark Elias was still interested in this race after a 12,000 vote victory, I knew that I needed to pay attention to it too.
So in terms of the rules that need to be governed or perhaps changed, what are they?
Well, you know, I think that's a really important question. And I think after the 2000 election, you know, Florida took a long, hard look at these election laws. Obviously, they didn't want a repeat of that situation. There have been subsequent changes since. There was another issue in 2016 regarding provisional ballots. And the state took another opportunity to look at their laws there. So, you know, that's very important. I mean, this state was not foreign to the concept of revisions to election laws, and these laws were in place for a reason. Certainly, when you have an opportunity to test them out, like we did in this recount, there are going to be things that we want to review and see if we can do differently. But these laws were in place, and they had to be followed. Every single lawsuit that Governor Scott put his name on was intended to make sure the rule of the law was followed. Every single lawsuit the Democrats tried to bring forward was to do something about that law in order to make sure their candidate could win.
What about what Stacey Abrams said about the legitimacy of the Georgia race?
Yeah, you know, I think that's so interesting and unfortunate. And I think the reason for her statement, perhaps, is that Democrats have shown that they're not willing to respect the will of the voters. You know, Rick Scott won on election night. You know, he was successful. It was, you know, a 12,000 vote margin. The voters spoke. They were incredibly clear on November 6th, but yet the entire state was put through this long, prolonged recount process. You know, lots of folks taken away from their families, from their jobs to volunteer. It was entirely unnecessary. The will of the voters was clear. You know, in the history of American politics, we have never had a recount overturn a margin of more than 1,200 votes. So, you know, when we're sitting here looking at a margin of 12,000 votes and 1,200 votes is the most we've ever seen overturn, you knew that this was going to go the way of the voters. Thank God.
What about the claim of voter suppression and the evidence? Does it exist or not exist in Georgia?
You know, I think that the Democrats look at elections these days as an opportunity for litigation. You know, it's just like redistricting. They haven't been successful at the ballot box, and they're unwilling to believe that the same voters that could put Donald Trump in the White House would be the voters that would select their representatives now. They're unwilling to believe that. And so they are taking their fight to the courthouses. And I feel like it's our job, and we did this with Governor Scott's lead, you know, it's our job to make sure that these rules are followed, and to protect the decision that the voters made on November 6th. You know, I don't think there was voter suppression. I think it was important to make sure the law was followed, and I was proud to be a part of Governor Scott's mandate to make sure that happened.
In terms of the matching laws, matching the name to what's on the ballot when people check in to vote, there's a lot of suggestion that that was overly onerous for voters. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so, you know, this was something the state looked at in 2016. This is something they've looked at incredibly recently. And again, they put protections in place to make sure that it wasn't overly onerous for voters. You know, the counties are required to provide notice to voters to tell them if their signature's not good enough so they can go in and have an opportunity to correct that. There are plenty of protections in place to make sure that, you know, their votes are counted. I mean, Republicans want people to vote. They want their votes to be counted. It's Democrats that want to change the law so that valid legal votes are worth less because they're bringing in lots of illegal votes. I mean, are we to the place where, you know, if people are interested in Georgia, that they should start voting, or, you know, if people really care about this race, their vote should count twice? I mean, it kind of seems sometimes that that's what Democrats are looking for here.
So one last question. In terms of the laws that they tried to amend after the election was over, in terms of how long they could go ahead counting ballots, are there challenges on that you're pushing against as you prepare for the 2020 presidential election?
Absolutely. You know, I think the Democrats really showed their hand here. They showed what they're willing to do, you know, to throw out deadlines that have been established for years, to require these new, you know, requirements for voters in order to get their vote counted. I mean, it's just quite ridiculous. And so, yeah, you know, I think the NRSC at Governor Scott's lead, you know, we're going to see what we can do about continuing to fight these battles, because I think it's incredibly important to make sure that when a person goes in to vote, you know, they've read on the rules, they understand what they have to do, they've done it correctly. They need to know that their vote will be counted. They also need to know that people who haven't followed the rules, these rules that are designed to make sure people can vote, they need to know that their votes won't be counted. So, you know, we have to work really, really hard to make sure that happens.
Jessica First Johnson, thank you very much. Good to have you here tonight.
Thank you so much.
So here now, Katie Pavlich, townhall.com, Fox News editor and Fox News contributor, and Juan Williams, co-host of The Five and Fox News political analyst. Juan, I'm guessing that you take issue with some of what she just said.
Well, I think the clear issue for me is she was saying, you know, that people have to know that there's a procedure. You have to follow the procedure in order to vote. But I think lots of people, especially I would point out in Georgia, did just that. They applied, they registered to vote, and it's over 50,000, Martha, voter registration cards that were rejected by, guess who? Brian Kemp, who was the Secretary of State, who was also the candidate for governor of Georgia.
Are these 50,000 people, you know, where's the outcry from them that their vote did not end up counting? Because, you know, a number of accounts of this say that that doesn't seem to exist, that they're not seeing that.
Well, I don't think we're seeing it. But again, what you're dealing with, especially in the Abrams campaign, is an effort to get people who were not participating in the election to come out to vote for a first time. Lots of first-time voters. We're talking here about young people, minorities, who typically are not quick to participate in the midterms. I think they lose interest. But the point here is I don't think that Brian Kemp should be running an election in which he is a candidate.
Is it right for Stacey Abrams to charge that there was voter suppression in the Georgia race, Katie?
It is not appropriate for her to charge that there was voter suppression. And if we can't cite something if it doesn't exist as evidence of voter suppression.
The 53,000 ballots voter registration cards exist.
She's frustrated and are making this argument that because the Secretary of State, Brian Kemp, cleaned up the voter rolls 8 years ago, that somehow he was suppressing the vote. But the problem is that when you don't clean up voter rolls, A, it's illegal to do that, and B, that is a breeding ground for voter fraud. And so it is the Secretary of State's job in every single state, not just Georgia, to make sure that those rules are cleaned up. And I just have to say, you know, in America, we pride ourselves on the peaceful transition of power. And this continuing, you know, refusal to accept the legitimacy of elections when you just don't like the outcome. We keep hearing all about attacks on democracy, the delegitimization of our elections, not accepting a result just because you don't like it without any evidence to back up your claims of voter suppression or voter fraud, argument, that causes real problems about undermining democracy.
People do have to have a confidence in the system and that the system works on all sides. But when you look back into this idea of voter suppression, it was a law that was passed in 1997 under a Democratic legislature and Democrat Governor Zell Miller to make sure that people who had died and people who had moved out of Georgia were not on those voter rolls because they didn't want anyone to abuse those lists of dead and moved away in order to create vote fraud.
That's
Isn't
a great
that a good thing?
That's a great thing. But here's the thing. There's no evidence of any voter fraud. We're not discussing that. We're talking about people who filled out a registration form and saw it thrown out. We're talking about people who are absentee ballots being discarded. We're talking about polling places, Martha, being closed and being told, oh, the toilets don't work. Oh, it's a black neighborhood. That's why we're closing those polling places.
Okay, well, that was a lot to unpack there, but I want to go back to your claim about there's no voter fraud here. That is exactly the point. The reason why the Secretary of State goes through the rolls and makes sure that there are not eligible people on the rolls is to prevent those kinds of voter fraud. And this idea that you're arguing that there was suppression and polling places closed purposely in black communities to keep them out of the voting place is a pretty serious charge to make when we haven't seen evidence of that.
No,
happening.
we have seen, because we know about those polling places being closed. And let's go to Florida for a second.
But Juan, it wasn't because they were closed based
last
on
Last thought from you, Juan, and then she's quoted as saying, no one gives you power. You have to take it from them. So how will that play with Democrats already wary of giving her the gavel?
I like her. Can you believe it? I like Nancy Pelosi. I mean, she's tough and she's smart, but she deserves to be Speaker.
Magazine that no one gives you power. You have to take it from them. Maybe inciting a bit of rebellion in her own ranks, 16 Democrats have written an open letter opposing her for Speaker, saying our majority came on the backs of candidates who said that they would support new leadership because voters in hard-won districts and across the country want to see real change in Washington. We promise to change the status quo, and we intend to deliver on that promise, they wrote. But the president wants her to win. So could Republicans help Pelosi keep the gavel? Joining me now, Jason Chaffetz, who once ran for House Speaker himself, and Richard Fowler, syndicated radio talk show host. Both are Fox News contributors. Welcome, gentlemen. Good to have you with us this evening. So the Democrats right now are at 232. That number could increase if we just show the balance of power. Undecided is 4 right now, as some of those races are continuing to be decided. And then we have the list of 22 who are now in the House who promised that they would oppose Pelosi when she, if indeed they were elected. So, Richard, how do you think this is going to go, and how do you think she's going to navigate this?
Well, listen, in another network, Nancy Pelosi said it best, that one thing her father taught her, the former mayor of Baltimore, is how to count. And she is quite a tactician. So I think she's counting the votes, and she's talking to her folks, and she's trying to figure out how she do it. Don't get me wrong. I think that, Pelosi's going to have to make some changes and some concessions. One of that is she's going to have to come up with a plan when she's no longer the speaker. I think she'll probably have one more term left. I think 2, we're going to have to do what the Republicans did a long time ago and have some chairman and have some, term limits on chairmanships and some other things, and also diversifying her leadership team so it looks more like her caucus. So I think she's going to have to make those changes.
So it sounds like you think she's going to survive, despite the fact that she can't lose 18 votes, and she's got 22 people who just signed this letter. But you're pointing out some of the possible negotiation tactics, which she may be able to employ to hold on to it. She might get GOP votes, Jason Chaffetz. Is that a possibility, do you think?
I think it's really hard for Republicans to do that, but there is no greater foil than Nancy Pelosi. If you're going into 2020, you'd much rather be out there talking about a Nancy Pelosi than, say, a Beto O'Rourke or some new, fresh face that's suddenly the speaker, to juxtapose that person against, say, Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell. But I don't think the Democrats are going to go there. Nancy Pelosi has raised more money than anybody in the history of the United States Congress. Democrat, Republican, House or Senate. She rules with an iron fist. She's not going to let it go, and that's why they don't have the votes today. If they would have had the vote this week, as they normally and customarily do, but she doesn't have the votes right now.
So let's take a look at the Senate balance of power. The Mississippi race is still out there. That's going to be right after Thanksgiving. Currently, they are at 52 rather. And if they lose Mississippi, they could go to 51. Remember this moment from Lindsey Graham talking about the balance of power in the Senate. Watch this.
This is the most unethical sham since I've been in politics. Boy, y'all want power. God, I hope you never get it. I hope the American people can see through this sham.
Obviously, that was during his most impassioned moments during the Kavanaugh hearing. But the question, Richard, is whether or not Maxine Waters has spoken very forcefully about wanting to impeach President Trump, whether or not Democrats, if they do continue to gain power on the Hill, will go down that road, and whether or not Nancy Pelosi will be able to hold them back.
Well, listen, I think impeachment's very, very far off. I think there are probably a handful of members that want to talk about impeachment, but I think that's far off. I think what you're going to see the Democrats do in their first 100 days in running the House is they're probably going to pass a Voting Rights Act. They're probably going to find a way to ensure that people with pre-existing conditions get health care. They're going to probably find a way to pass a bill to make prescription drugs lower. They're going to do exactly what they promised the voter they were going to do. And Jason is right. Republicans can use Nancy Pelosi as a foil if they
subject. You didn't answer the question, Richard.
I did answer the question.
Answer the question.
I did answer the question, but let me make this one point. The one point
I
is
think
that
his answer was that he doesn't think it's going to happen. You sound like you do not think impeachment is going to be on the table. Last quick thought, Jason. You disagree?
They have an insatiable desire, the Democrats do, to juxtapose themselves against Donald Trump and prove to their base that they are going tough on Donald Trump. They've already pre-announced 86 different investigations. They've already presupposed the outcome of those investigations, and they are not going to be able to help
That's what you want
themselves.
to happen, Jason. We want to fix the problems for the American people.
They've already announced it, Richard.
But we are
That's
going
already
to
in the
work
rearview mirror. They've already announced it.
We'll see what happens.
The
brief will be in exactly what happens, and we're about to see it unfold. Thanks, you guys. Great to see you tonight. With proper forest management, we can stop the devastation constantly going on in California. Get smart! ! But now it turns out the governor is looking to push back on environmentalists and ease the rules in order to clear more trees and build more roads. Claudia Cowan live in Chico, California with the full report tonight. Claudia.
Good evening, Martha. That's right. Outgoing Governor Jerry Brown now talking about relaxing the rules a little bit as they pertain to logging. Of course, he's going to have a big fight on his hands from environmental groups. But the politics of forest management policy, really the last thing on the minds of people here. For thousands of fire survivors, this disaster recovery center that opened at the Chico Mall is their first stop on the long road to recovery and rebuilding. And this center has been buzzing with activity since it opened on Friday. Here, people can register with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, to apply for federal aid. They can also access services like the DMV and mental health counseling. They can even pet a therapy dog. Several dozen agencies are at this one-stop shop that will stay open until it's no longer needed, likely sometime next year.
Well, that's devastating, and there's going to be grief, and we'll all go through those different parts of grief. It's also really encouraging to see this community come together.
Over the weekend, President Trump surveyed the damage in Paradise. This is a conservative district in a deep blue state, and many residents here appreciated the president's visit.
I'm grateful for all the support that he's giving us. He didn't have to come here the way California's treated him, and he did. And for that, I'm very grateful.
Joe Florence and his family were among the 100 or so who gathered for a vigil last night to mourn those who perished and find strength to face the days ahead. Evacuees said being around others who've also lost everything provided a measure of comfort, as did the banner on the altar proclaiming "We will rise from the ashes," #Paradise Strong, #Butte County Strong. With rain in the forecast for tomorrow, recovery teams are intensifying their efforts to find bones or bone fragments before the ground and ashes turn to mud. The campfire is now almost out, having burned an area roughly equivalent in size to the city of Chicago. Another victim was found yesterday, increasing the number of those killed by the campfire to 77. Martha.
Awful. Thank you very much. Claudia Cowan in California tonight. And this Fox News alert as we await a press conference in moments from Chicago. Fox News confirming the police officer shot there today is dead. And chaos on the streets of Portland as dueling protests turn very ugly, leading to confrontations like this.
I'm good, man. It's all good. Hey. Let her do it. Let her spit. See that? Let her spit. That's all good.
If bulky jackets.
Over the weekend, when Antifa activists clashed with protesters from a new group that calls themselves Him Too movement. The skirmish led to multiple arrests and this altercation.
I'm good, man. It's all good. Hey. Let her do it. Let her do it. Let her spit. See that? Let her spit. That's all good. Hey. Go ahead. Hit me. And I'm going to
Unreal. Trace Gallagher has this story for us from our West Coast newsroom tonight. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Martha. These dueling rallies lasted about 6 hours in Portland. Martha.
Unbelievable scene. Thank you very much, Trace. So that fight over Me Too and Him Too coming just hours after a huge announcement was made by the Trump administration that will dramatically change the way that Me Too cases are handled on college campuses, encouraging true due process for the accused and for the accuser. Critics say that it will discourage victims from coming forward, and it's going to be a very hot topic going forward on college campuses. Jason Riley is a Wall Street Journal columnist, and he joins me now. Jason, thank you very much for being with us this evening. In many ways, the college campuses went through the Me Too movement before the rest of the country did. And they were given rules by the Obama administration that were very strict, in essence saying, if you're not tough enough on these people who are accused, we could potentially take away your federal funding.
Yes, and they didn't do enough to protect the rights of the accused. And, first thing I'd say about Betsy DeVos, the education secretary, is that last year she said that she was going to promulgate some new guidelines to make the process more balanced, and she has delivered on that promise, and I think she deserves a lot of credit for that. But you're right, the issue here is due process, and the accused were not getting the due process that that they should get if the process is going to have any integrity whatsoever. And even the courts have started to recognize this. There have been a number of state and federal decisions that have said that the accused have a right to cross-examine the accuser. And that is not happening on a lot of college campuses.
Yeah, today. I mean, everyone wants accusers to be heard, and you also want the other side of the equation to also be heard. And we did a documentary about this a couple of years ago and talked to a few different young men whose lives had been dramatically altered by this. And young women would say that their lives were dramatically altered in similar situations as well. But in some of these cases, not all the time is the accused guilty. And this is just one story to give you a sense of what we're talking about here.
I got a phone call from the school's Title IX department telling me in no uncertain terms that I had to pack up my stuff and leave my dorm immediately.
To John, it had been a sexual encounter of a type not uncommon among young people. Even Jane Doe had not called it assault at first. He still remembers their long discussion the day after.
We talked for nearly 3 or 4 hours, and we chalk it up to a drunken mistake.
But now here he was, the campus rapist.
A lot of times these young men were, kicked out of class. They weren't allowed to be in the same room with young women. So your thoughts on where this goes from?
Being accused of something is not the same thing as being guilty of it. And again, the case was stacked against the accuser or against the accused person under the Obama guidelines. And I think some balance was needed there because you want the outcome to have some support, some legitimacy on both sides. And I think these guidelines put in place by DeVos will do that. They will give the whole process more integrity, and a more satisfying conclusion, I think, will come from having a more fair process in place.
Yeah, I think it also divides which cases are possible to adjudicate on campus. And just so everyone knows, the panels that make these huge decisions affecting people's lives are usually 3 professors who have been picked sort of somewhat randomly to listen to this case and decide upon it.
And under the new guidelines, all of the evidence that they gather will now be able to be accessible by both sides. A lot of people may not realize this, but under the Obama guidelines, that is not what would happen.
You couldn't even hear what she was accusing you of or he was accusing you of.
Exactly. So again, fairness to the process should be the goal, and I think this puts us on track for that.
Yeah, we're going to watch this very closely. Jason, thank you very much. Good to see you tonight. So Fox News alert for you this evening. Another story that we have been following tonight. Police news conference expected any moment.
Did MBS lie to you, sir?
I don't know. You know, who can really know?
Do you just live with it because you need him?
Well, will anybody really know? All right. Will anybody really know? But he did have certainly people that were reasonably close to him that were probably involved. But at the same time, we do have an ally, and I want to stick with an ally that in many ways has been very good.
President Trump making a lot of news in an extensive and wide-ranging interview with our own Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday this weekend. Here to react now, Guy Benson and Marie Harf, co-hosts of the Fox News radio show Benson and Harf. Hi, guys. Good to see you tonight. Marie, let me start with you. What did you think of that answer?
Well, we now know that the CIA has concluded in their assessment that Mohammed bin Salman directed the Saudi government to undertake this killing. That is the CIA's assessment with high confidence, Martha. So President Trump has been hesitant to accept the conclusions of the CIA on a number of issues. We know he wants to work closely with the Saudis, but really it's disappointing that he seems to be overlooking the intelligence assessment because he's made some calculation about what's in the national security interest of the United States vis-a-vis Iran or oil prices or whatever. I would argue that letting the Saudis get away with this, making excuses for them, is actually very much not in our national security interest. And he can decide whether or not he wants to side with the CIA or the Saudis. That choice should not be hard.
You know, unfortunately, Guy, we have a long history of looking the other way with Saudi Arabia. It's not just this president. Previous presidents did the same thing.
Yeah. I just wish he could be more upfront by saying the CIA believes this with a high degree of confidence, as Marie just said. It's unacceptable. There will be consequences. There already have been some consequences. But, and make the pivot to what he said correctly, there are strategic interests for the United States to not just sever ties with the Saudis. They're an important player in the region. We can work with them and have worked with them on some important issues. We can do both of these things at the same time. And I think that he tried to strike that balance. I would like a little bit more of an overt condemnation of MBS, because I think it's pretty clear based on our intelligence, what we know now, what they've concluded.
Yeah. Good point. Let's watch this one on Admiral McRaven.
Bill McRaven, retired admiral, Navy SEAL, 37 years, former head of U.S. Special Operations.
Hillary Clinton fan. Okay. He's a Hillary Clinton backer and an Obama backer. And frankly,
he was a Navy SEAL.
Wouldn't it have been nice if we got Osama bin Laden a lot sooner than that? Wouldn't it have been nice?
Marie?
Yeah, I just hate the way the president makes these off-the-cuff sort of snide remarks solely because someone criticized him. Bill McRaven is not a Hillary Clinton supporter. He is not a political person. He led the most successful raid of recent years, you know, under the U.S. military to get bin Laden, which they did as soon as the CIA had found him. They moved immediately. They put together a plan. And for the president on Veterans Day week to go after a highly decorated, nonpartisan military hero like Bill McRaven, it just shows how petty the president can be. And I really don't like it, Martha.
Guy.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that the implication at the end of that answer was if McRaven had been better at his job, maybe we could have gotten bin Laden sooner. I don't think there's a shred of evidence behind that. And to me, I defer to Rob O'Neill on this one, the trigger man on Osama bin Laden, who's been very critical of the previous administration and relatively supportive of the Trump administration. He fully backed up McRaven on this one, which I think is the appropriate thing to do.
Yeah.
He has an excellent reputation and a long record of service. So Condoleezza Rice, can she save the Cleveland Browns real quick? Marie?
No one can.
I agree. Not even Baker Mayfield. Not even Baker Mayfield, although Condoleezza Rice is a true football fan, which I love.
She is. I
think NFL commissioner maybe one day. I think that would fit.
I think we're all pulling for that. Great to see you guys. Guy Benson, Marie Harf. Thanks a lot. All right, so that is the story for this Monday night. Tweet me at Martha MacCallum using the hashtag #TheStory. We will see you back here tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Tucker Carlson is ready to go in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being here, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.